Shalom, this is Yosef. I'd like to share a summary as to why Am Yisrael should not rely on reason and natural law in place of a positive legal system, and secondly, why we should be careful to examine and ensure that the philosophy we study and embrace do not contradict our legal principles, the principles of our nation. In the Morana Vokim in part 1, in chapter 71, it says that our Andalusian scholars followed the teachings of the philosophers, from whom they accepted those opinions which were not opposed to our own legal principles. And the next part, it goes on to explain how the nation of Israel began to adopt the ways of the nations. Question: have we gone in the opposite direction? Have we been influenced by the philosophy of the nations that are in contradiction with our principles to that which were taught by our prophets and sages? Let's first analyze by delving into a central principle of Torah and Judaism, Gemilut Hasadim, which can be translated as acts of loving kindness. It is important to take note that the essence of this mitzvah is its fulfillment without anticipating anything in return. Thus, it is deduced that the highest level of Gemilut Hasadim can be to participate in funeral rites because the dead can never repay us. But deeper than that, one is not to do anything, even out of fear of any kind of divine retribution, but simply one thing: love for the other as himself. The Rambam in his Hilkot Avel says that it is a mitzvah based on the verse in Sefer Vaikra, Ve'ahavta l'reacho kamocho, love your neighbor as yourself, that we should visit the sick, comfort mourners, prepare for a funeral, prepare a bride, accompany guests, attend to all the needs of a burial, carry a corpse on one's shoulders, walk before the bier, mourn, dig a grave, and bury the dead, and also to bring joy to a bride and groom, and help them in all their needs. He emphasizes that these are Gemilut Hasadim, that one carries out with his person that have no limit. In his Hilkot Deod, based on the same verse in Sefer Vaikra, he says that each man is commanded to love each and every one of Israel as himself. And for this reason, he goes on to explain that one should therefore speak the praises of others and show concern for their money, just as he is concerned with his own money and desires his own honor. Hillel the elder said, "What you do not like done unto yourself, do not do unto others." This is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Although he may have phrased it from a different angle, he made the point clear in the second part of his statement perfectly, that Ahavat Israel is the foundation of the entire Torah. Now, let us delve into the central principle of our secular modern day philosophy, a philosophy rooted in the age of reason. Not only do we live in a time and age when what we believe to be reason is glorified, it is also said that through the exercise of reason that we can discover what is defined as natural law. Natural law is a theory in ethics and philosophy that says that we, as human beings, possess intrinsic values that govern our reasoning and behavior. Natural law maintains that these rules of right and wrong are inherent in all people and therefore universal, and are not created by society or court judges. A natural law in economics, for instance, is the law of self-interest, that people work for their own good. But not only in economics, psychological egoism, the theory of human motivation also suggests that it is a natural law that all human motivations, no matter how good, are ultimately selfish. And to add to this, the theory concludes that human beings are not capable of doing otherwise. In other words, human beings are, according to psychological egoism, not capable of being altruistic, which also means that human beings are incapable of genuine love and, most certainly, what we identify as unconditional love. It may come as a surprise to some, but this position was once almost universally accepted by political economists, philosophers, and psychologists. Are we to accept a position just because the majority accepts it? To what extent it is accepted now, I don't know. But the late Joel Feinberg, who was a professor of philosophy at the University of Arizona, begged to differ. He pointed out through his arguments that, upon careful consideration, one will find no good reason to accept psychological egoism. He understood that defenders of the theory sometimes note that men get pleasure from helping others or feel the pangs of conscience about not helping. According to Feinberg, far from supporting psychological egoism, this fact testifies against it. For why should men feel such pleasure, if not that helping others satisfy a desire to help them, a desire that is emphatically not aimed only at one's own happiness? My question is, if altruism is psychologically possible, then shouldn't we act on it? Isn't it our human nature that we feel pleasure in helping or unconditionally loving someone other than ourselves? To the contrary, the prescriptive theory famously advocated by Ayn Rand is ethical egoism, that all people ought to pursue their own self-interest. Now, while people like Ayn Rand openly loathed altruism, I personally give her credit for the fact that she was bold enough to point out that altruism is incompatible with individualism and thus capitalism. According to her, altruism and capitalism are philosophical opposites which cannot coexist in the same man or in the same society. Are we being gradually trained to discard the Torah? Because the expression Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh is, as can now be seen, the antithesis of ethical egoism and therefore capitalism. Am Yisrael has a responsibility to look out for each other. It is a mitzvah. Permit me to add a question here. Can the pursuit of money be used as a psyop to keep us from working, to keep us working and moving in the opposite direction? As we can see, natural law is subjective because there are limitations to the human mind due to conditioning, and this includes geography, language, culture, poverty, wealth, war, peace, age, gender, health, and especially mental illnesses, and thus the big question between what perception is and what is reality. And speaking of which, let's go back to the question of psychological egoism. I question the background of the people that articulated a so-called scientific theory, because that would in fact be true for someone with a narcissistic personality disorder, for instance. Altruism may not be possible for these people. Narcissists are incapable of love, and even if they do, it's superficial. The irony is that ethical egoism, which is essential in a capitalist structure, cultivates narcissistic characteristics in a person, while the FBI considers individuals with these characteristics as well as other characteristics and personality disorders that share similarities, such as psychopathy, as potentially dangerous. Is it a coincidence that by the end of 2023, the United States, being a capitalist promoting country, had the highest number of incarcerated individuals worldwide, with almost 1.8 million people in prison? Is there a relationship between crime and the philosophy underlying capitalism? Please take note, it is not my intent to speak disparagingly of people who may suffer from personality disorders, simply that they should be managed accordingly for theirs and everyone else's safety. Also, unknown to many is that while there are aspects of capitalism that are rooted in the occult, capitalism also has, vice versa, revived and created new movements in the realm of the occult. And this brings us to a more extreme form of ethical egoism, and that is the Laveyan satanic version of ethical egoism, which is also seen as an institutionalism of Machiavellianism self-interest. Machiavellianism is a personality trait that denotes cunningness, the ability to be manipulative, and a drive to use whatever means necessary to gain power, and is one of the traits that form what we call the dark triad, along with narcissism and psychopathy. I'd like to repeat this: the ability to be manipulative, cunningness, and the drive to use whatever means necessary to gain power. Does that sound familiar? While many would deny it, the occult and the philosophy of Satanism is, in my opinion, at the heart of modern day capitalism and the New World Order. It may be of interest to some that philosophical Satanism is also a gateway to theistic Satanism, marshaled by organizations such as the Temple of Set and the Satanic Brotherhood, where it is said that its highest position is referred to as the very most selfish of self, which would basically mean that one becomes a living God. Thus, not only does ethical egoism violate the mitzvah of Gemilut Hasadim, but it also lays the foundation for self-worship and avodah zarah. Now, please take note that it is not my intent to vilify the occult and Satanism, which is a diverse movement that brings edification, enlightenment to its followers. My purpose is simply to make known its incompatibility with Torah and Judaism. Are we being gradually herded to discard the Torah? Is this philosophy, ethical egoism, subtly and unknowingly being ingrained into the minds of Am Yisrael? What I am trying to say is that there is a strong tendency in our age and time to rely on our own reasoning and the reasoning of people in authority who speak in the name of science and ethics. But what we fail to see is that there are limitations to the human mind which affects how truth is perceived. This is the reality. And having said that, we must be careful to whom and what we are listening to. Thus, it is morally wrong to enforce what is deemed to be natural law as universal, because every nation is guided by their own legal system for various reasons, and while the elements discussed can be taken as reasons to reject natural law, Am Yisrael relies on their legal system for the sole reason that it is the Berit, it is the law, a positive legal system, it is Torah. Now, I'd like listeners to take note. This message is in no way an attempt to promote socialism or undermine the capitalist system that we live in today, but it's a reminder that as a community, as a nation, Am Yisrael should continue to strive to live by the ideals of Torah, by the principles of Torah, despite living and thriving in a capitalist system. To conclude, for one, we do not rely on reason and natural law in place of a positive legal system. And secondly, we should be careful to examine and ensure that the philosophy we study and embrace do not contradict our legal principles, the principles of our nation. Amen.